Hi, this is Jenya from Rose Tax and Financial, and I am here to walk you through the dependent worksheet. If you have a dependent, you need to fill this out, one for each dependent. So, what's a dependent? Well, it's someone that is living with you and is younger than 19 by the end of the tax year or in college and younger than 24. So if they're like, let's say 20, but they're not in college anymore, you can't take them. Oh, this doesn't count disabled dependents, and there are a few exceptions to that, but basically, and especially if it's your child, usually if they're over 19 and not a full-time student anymore, you can't claim them. Now, if they are above 24 and they're not making more than $4,150, you can still claim them. So there's every IRS rule has 14 exceptions, but this is the main sort of gist of the rule. Um, so if your dependent files their own tax return, they need to mark on that return, someone claims me as their dependent. If they don't mark that box, your return is going to get rejected. So I highly recommend talking to your dependent and just asking that they wait to file their return if they're filing their own return till after your return is filed. If we're filing the return for the dependent, then we know to check the box. But if they're filing it themselves, and this happens like every year to 3 or 4 people, we try to file and oops, you got rejected because your kid already filed their return and did not mention that they were your dependent. So it happens, but then it's a whole paper filing and it's an amendment and it's going to cost you a lot extra. So do talk to your dependent before the filing season. Anyway, dependent number, whatever number you put there, name. If you're a recurring client, you don't need to put their social. Like if you claimed the same person last year, you don't need to put their social um, and you can obviously put their date of birth. If you're new, we need all this information. Number of months that they lived with you in the home, that's 12 months if they lived with you the whole year, or if they're at college, it counts as 12. So you don't need to worry about how many months they were out of the house or anything for college because they still count as 12 months in the home. So yeah, this all looks very exhausting, I'm sure. I'm so sorry that we have to ask you all this. Over the years, the IRS has gotten more and more strict about penalties for preparers if we don't ask you these questions and have proof of the answers. So it's $5,000 penalty per case. So since I don't really want to pay those type of penalties, that's why you have to fill out this irritating looking thing. So sorry about that. Um, yes or no, I am the custodial parent. I have the right to claim my dependent. If they didn't live with you, this is questionable. They need to live with you for more than half the year. So mark whatever. If it's no, then you don't really need to do this form because you can't take them as your dependent. So um, the next question is the dependent lived in my home for 183 days or more. Yes. Or no, whichever one it is. I was a non-resident alien for part of the year. I do need to know that. I don't know why. It's just an IRS question. That's you, not the dependent. And then part of my salary goes into a dependent care account. If you do that at work, just note yes. Um, your main home or that of your spouse, if you're doing married filing joint, was in the U.S. Yes or no? I or my spouse could be claimed as the dependent on someone else's return. So hopefully that's not the case, but if it is, then I guess that's a yes um, or not. So the IRS has previously disallowed my child credit or earned income credit, and then we'll need to know which years. We've never had anyone with that, but it could happen. Um, so I do need you to check these little boxes of what you could provide to the IRS if they wanted to have proof that your dependent is your dependent. So if you have a social security card, a birth certificate, just check all the boxes of things you have that you can use to prove the dependency. Then these are simple questions. Is your child a U.S. citizen? Are they married? Um, if there's an active release claim. So this is simple stuff. So the next question is, the child was under age 12 and I paid for non-educational care. So if you pay for a daycare or summer camp or things like that, there's a federal credit for that. Now the credit is only $600, but that's actually pretty good because that means that's not a deduction. That means that's a credit where they take $600 off of whatever you owe, or they add $600 to whatever um, would be getting as a refund. So it's a non-refundable credit, but it goes towards your refund. It's a little complex, but anyway, it's good. Put in, we do need the EIN of the daycare provider or summer school provider or whatever it was, not school, summer camp, um, provider name and address. A few states have a credit for kids that are between K through 12. Just name where it is and oh, why am I not asking how much you spent? Oh, I am. Next line. Sorry, I thought, oh, geez. This is for Illinois, but there are a couple of other states that have it. So feel free to mark how much you spent on their school fees. Obviously, if you're in a non-tax state, you don't need to do that. And if you know your state doesn't do it, just ignore that question. Okay, the last section about college, that's self-explanatory. This credit, it doesn't matter who paid for the education. So even if Granny paid for the education or your neighbor, if it's your dependent, you still get the credit. So this is a fantastic credit. So make sure that you mark in here and you give us the 1098-T from the institution, university. Okay, this last section is really important for those of you that are single and living with a dependent in your home, or you are living separate from your spouse and you have a dependent in the home. We absolutely, positively must have these check marked, or we'll write you back and try to get them from you again. So to make all of our lives easier, just check the boxes here. If you're married filing joint, ignore this. But if you're not, do fill this whole thing out, because that's again a huge penalty for us if we don't ask you. So we are going to ask you. Anyway, thanks for filling this form out. I know it's a bit of a turd. Um, and we never used to have to ask these questions years ago, but we do now for the IRS. Okay, thanks, and always call or email if you have any questions. Bye.